welcome again to our program. We're continuing our series taking a look at local government, its operations, the way it interacts not only within a local government agency, but within the greater community, some of the issues about revenue and financing, which we've talked about in the past. And today we have a very distinguished panel of Village of Addison representatives and subject experts as we're going to talk about the topic of unfunded mandates. This is something that sounds a little confusing, almost a little, well, wait, if it's unfunded, isn't a mandate a good thing? So we're going to have all these questions answered, and also how recent developments here in Addison will be impacting you, our residents, and what the Village of Addison's elected officials and village staff are doing to address this. So first of all, joining us is Addison's village manager, Joe Moranowitz. Joe, thanks for coming in and bringing the team with you here. It's great, and I'm going to give you the opportunity, if you would please, Joe, first of all, to introduce the panel and kind of what they bring to the table here today.
They bring a lot. First, thank you for having us here and educating our residents, because it's a super important topic. To my left here is Colleen Witt, our finance director. Awesome at what she does. Our legal, David Freeman with Robbins and Schwartz. Our public works superintendent, Ryan Hayden. And then our chief of police, Roy Selvik, is with us. And as you said, subject matter experts. They know their craft. They do their craft very well, very dedicated to it. So I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today.
And the topic, Joe, what we were going to talk about is unfunded mandates. And before we get into some of the detail, and we'll have Dave in a moment tell us really about the legal definition and how it impacts municipalities with legislative action, what happens here locally in the Village of Addison when topics like an unfunded mandate, something that is really going to put a drain on our financial operations, how does that work, and how do we as the staff with the elected officials try and find a path to get through some of these things?
Great question. So an unfunded mandate in its most simplistic form, before legal really, David, goes into the elements of it. An unfunded mandate comes from Springfield, and that gets passed down to us. And not all unfunded mandates are a bad thing. I know our chief of police he's going to talk about some good things that have come out from an unfunded mandate. However, our responsibility, we in essence have to stretch that dollar that comes into us, our operational budget. We have to stretch it a little bit more. Maybe we can't do as much as we could from last year because we have an unfunded mandate where Springfield is saying, we need you to comply to this. Oh, and it's going to cost X amount. Where do we get that money from? We didn't have it last year. They're saying we have to do it this year or comply within a year or two. So that's where the brains of the operation, Colleen Witt in finance, works with the department heads and myself, and we start to tackle that project and that problem, that issue. And okay, how are we going to get the revenue in? How are we going to adhere to the law? And how are we going to keep Addison really great in the way it is?
Well, Dave Freeman is the village attorney from Robbins Schwartz, as Joe mentioned in his introduction. And Dave, Joe just mentioned Springfield and the legal level of all of this. So we're going to look to you now to be kind of our professor here for the next few minutes, Professor, and tell us what is an unfunded mandate in the legal terms? How does municipal law and municipalities, how do they have to interact when they are beset with one of these issues of an unfunded mandate from a higher level of government?
Well, thanks, Don, and I appreciate being here. Let me talk a little bit about unfunded mandates, because we hear the term commonly used and sometimes people don't really know what that means. The term unfunded mandates basically means when the state or federal government passes legislation requiring a unit of local government to take certain action. However, the unfunded mandate portion of that means is that the unit of local government is not receiving any state or federal funding to take that action. Therefore, the cost of taking that action, which is required by the state or federal government, has to be paid 100% by the unit of local government. Typically, that results in higher costs, taxes, or fees to the residents of that unit of local government. So the question really is, why is that important to the Village of Addison? There's at least 3 reasons that I can think of why it should be important to the residents of the village. The first is it takes away local decision making. If you have an unfunded mandate, you are required by law to take certain action. it takes away your discretion, your ability to do other things that you, on the local level, may feel are more important. There might be something that you really want to do, but because the state or federal government has said you have to do something else at a cost of X, you have to take the money from the other project that you felt was more important and allocate it to the unfunded mandate. There are hundreds of bills annually in Springfield which talk about unfunded mandates. Now, luckily, not all of those pass. But the last study that the Illinois Municipal League did a year ago found that there were over 250 different bills introduced that would have required units of local government, such as the village, to spend money on these unfunded mandates. Now, not all 250 passed. There were about 30 or 40 that passed, but each of those required a unit of local government, such as Village of Addison, to do certain things that they otherwise would not have been required to do. The second reason that I can think of that unfunded mandates are important and should be important to the village is because it takes away from us the law that right now is on the books, the State Mandates Act, and requires us to do something in contravention of that law. And the way that the state legislature gets away from that is they simply waive that requirement. They recognize there's a State Mandates Act, but when they pass these unfunded mandates, they simply say to the village or other units of local government, it doesn't apply to you, and therefore you have to do what it is we're required.
And the legislature can just set that aside when they consider one of these bills then?
That's correct. The legislature makes the laws, and they decide when we can or can't waive those requirements. So they just build into some of these requirements the fact that we recognize there's a State Mandates Act, but we're waiving it. Finally, the third reason that I can think of with regard to unfunded mandates and why this is so important to the residents is because the village is charged with providing a lot of vital services to our residents. Police, obviously, water and sewer, all kinds of important things that the Village of Addison residents have come to expect, and rightly so. They want to make sure that when they turn on the faucet, water runs out. When they drive down the street, the road is going to be in good repair. When, God forbid, they have to call the police are going to respond in a timely fashion. Well, if there are unfunded mandates and the village manager and the finance director have to make a hard choice between, well, here's this unfunded mandate that requires us to spend dollars on something other than one of these vital village services, such as police or water and sewer, we don't have the opportunity to spend the money where we want and where we feel we need to spend the money. And that should be something that's decided by the local village elected officials, meaning the mayor and board of trustees, who obviously are residents of the village and know best as far as what the residents of the village need. So that's a broad overview of unfunded mandates, Don. Hopefully that helps explain to the residents why unfunded mandates should be important to them when they hear that term.
Yeah, Dave, how do these unfunded mandate bills, the initial bills, even make their way into the legislature? Are these typically public action groups or interest groups that contact their legislators and say, we should have this policy at your local municipal levels before we even start talking about how much it costs? We think as a matter of policy, you, representative or senator, you should introduce a bill to address this matter. Are they typically done through an initiative like that, would you say? And how do these things even start within the legislative process?
Well, I think the easy answer is they can come from anywhere and anything. They certainly can come from public interest groups. They can come from individuals. They can come from people within the state, people from without the state. It just depends. And I'll use two quick examples, not to steal the thunder from the police chief or from the superintendent of public works. But for example, police worn body cameras. Now that's been a big subject. Everybody's aware of that. Is that a good idea? It's a great idea, and I'm sure the chief will agree with me. That's a great idea, but it's an unfunded mandate. It's a very expensive proposition to equip all the officers in the Addison Police Department with a body camera and then to save that video footage. How was that brought to the attention of the legislature? Well, we all know there were some unfortunate, really tragic, terrible incidents that have occurred over the last number of years with regard to police shootings and other issues of that sort. And because of that, various people in the state decided it would be a good idea for all police officers to have body-worn cameras. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone thinks it's a good idea. The problem is, how do you fund that? That's on a state level. On a federal level, the federal government has decided that we need to change the way we're handling our wastewater treatment. And because of that, the village has to upgrade its wastewater facilities to the tune of millions of dollars. Again, is that a good idea from a health standpoint? I'm sure everyone would agree that's a great idea to upgrade how we handle our wastewater. The question is, how do we pay for it? So to answer your question, these initiatives can come from literally anywhere, from one person making a request of their state rep or state senator, to groups of people doing it, to organizations throughout the country.
Very good, thanks, Dave. So let's turn now to a couple of the village department representatives who we have on our panel today to find out about those very topics that Dave Freeman just mentioned. And Ryan Hayden is the superintendent of public works. Ryan, thanks for coming in to talk about this. I understand phosphorus is a problem for you guys, right? So, and how that is treated and handled locally within our water and water reclamation system. Can you tell us what this is all about? What is phosphorus such a bad thing? And didn't we live without this for a long time? And some of the things that you folks at Public Works are dealing with right now.
Definitely. I appreciate you having me on
Sure.
today to talk about this, Don. Phosphorus is the unfunded mandate that we have coming down the pipeline. And it's honestly something that really needs to be done. There's been a lot of scientific research to determine how bad phosphorus in high concentrations really is for the environment. This high concentration of phosphorus that we see in the waterways, it actually creates algae blooms, which then depletes, the water of dissolved oxygen. That could lead to fish kills, biological activity ceasing, septic conditions, and just a really unhealthy environment, since, everything in the world needs water. So if we're contaminating our water sources, we're really doing a harm for the future. So,
and you have to treat that then within our water reclamation system, right? You have to get it out.
We do. Currently, we do not have the setup to treat phosphorus because this was never a regulation in the past. So we're looking at very high-priced projects to be able to treat the phosphorus. And the Illinois EPA has come down with this mandate that by 2030, we have to be in compliance with meeting a maximum concentration of 1 milligram per liter of phosphorus in the wastewater, which is very hard to do unless if you have your facility set up correctly.
And you have to find ways to mitigate this problem as it's coming down now with this mandate. Things are already being done right now, right? You've got projects that are actually in place right now that are being handled, that our crew's been working on for some time now.
We do. Eliminating the combined sewer system is one very large part of removing phosphorus.
Okay.
In a combined sewer system, you have both your stormwater and your sanitary water go into one pipe, and all of that goes to your treatment plant. So we have one area of town that works on a combined sewer system, and right now we're actually working on eliminating that combined sewer system.
You got funding for that too.
We do. And Colleen's going to talk a lot more about how the village has been able to secure this funding and really help our residents out in a big way.
Yeah. Another project I know is being addressed, is being talked about right now, would be with regard to the 2 treatment plant facilities that we have right now, and the plan down in the future that we may be going to 1 combined treatment plant system. Is that correct?
That's correct. We've actually had multiple studies done by different engineering firms just to determine which is the best route for us to go. So they looked at what it would cost to upgrade both treatment plants to make them sustainable for the future, remove phosphorus, and do all different things, and what it would cost to essentially create a pumping station at one of the facilities and convey all the wastewater to one facility, which through these studies, we've actually found that to be the most cost-effective route. We would have 1 treatment facility, so 1 set of equipment, 1 set of labor, and
Maintenance
essentially,
costs and so on would all be addressed.
yes, so our long-term costs would actually be reduced for the residents.
Well, Colleen Witt is the Village of Addison's finance director. We recently talked with Colleen about how to understand and read your property tax bill. I guess we're going to look at it a little different way now, Colleen. Ryan had just mentioned costs involved with this, and there has been action that has been taken with regard to the revenue that would be coming in to help address some of these costs. Can you inform our viewers and tell me what exactly is being done here at the Village of Addison level when it comes to trying to find revenue sources for the projects that Ryan is speaking of?
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me as well. I appreciate that. As Ryan mentioned, so for the phosphorus removal, there are two major things that have to happen. The first one is the sewer separation, and we have two projects going on with that. The first project is up north of Lake in the area of Oak and Chestnut, and that project is about a little over $5 million is the cost of that for the water sewer separation. And we did receive an ARPA grant for just under $5 million.
Federal grant, right.
So we're using that grant money to pay for that. And then the second project with that is just south of Lake Street. It's in the Addison home area.
Okay.
Again, it's the sewer separation. And for that project, we're looking at about $7.6 million to complete that project. Wow. We did receive a grant for $3 million. So that left a balance of 4.6.
Yeah.
And again, as the attorney spoke about, we have to find revenue for that, right? So the grant money helps dramatically for sure, but then we still have this 4.6 million that we're looking for. So the decision was made to increase our user fee to pay for that, and what that comes to is about $2 a month for the resident.
On a resident's water bill.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. Very good. So will that revenue stream that you just mentioned help address that inequity in revenue then with these projects that are going on right now?
For those two projects,
Yeah.
it will, yes. So it's going to cover the $4 million that we were short. Okay. The next thing is for the EPA mandate. We have to have that phosphorus level down by January of 2030. So as Ryan also mentioned, we had engineering firms look at a study, and that has a very high ticket on it. So we're looking at about $150 million. So in order to fund that, we looked at lots of different options, and it looks like at this point we're going towards, we're going to use some of it from our operations budget. We have been putting some money aside for projects, large infrastructure
Capital
projects
yeah.
like this. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to have an EPA/consolidation fee. So our residents will be seeing that on their bills.
Okay. Consolidation in terms of consolidating those two plants together.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
And then lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to increase our home rule sales tax by 1/4%. So that's going to help dramatically with this project. It's also going to it's going to affect everybody that shops in Addison instead of putting all the burden on the residents.
Yeah, you often hear that when home rule sales tax is brought up. Aha! But this isn't just for the residents of Addison. This impacts people who do their commerce and pass through Addison. As a visitor to our community, we certainly would be very happy to see them shop locally, shop within Addison. That'll help with the home rule sales tax amount.
It will.
And how much is that going up by, Kelly?
The home room sales tax is going to go up by 1/4%.
1/4%.
Right.
If I could interject
Sure,
here,
yeah,
because
Joe, go right
that's a
ahead,
really
yeah.
good point that Colleen brings up. I'd like to use a simple example, Sam's Club. We have a Sam's Club in town. It's right off of Lake Street and Route 53 to the west end. However, as we all know, a lot of Sam's Clubs in the area closed down. We're fortunate enough to keep ours. It's a really good thing from what, Colleen, you're talking about with that 1/4% sales tax. Our mayor and our board realize this financial burden of an unfunded mandate can't be put solely on the backs of our residents. It just can't. When Ryan's talking about projects, these are big projects, an estimation of almost $150 million. Not thousand, 150 million. So how does the board, and as Dave talked about, the residents, the board, the mayor, they're residents here. So you take that Sam's Club, we have people that come, residents that come from Bloomingdale, Itasca, maybe a little bit further north or further south. They come to Sam's Club, they shop. So it's really ingenious, and what they did is a 1/4% sales tax will have people from outside of Addison help fund our infrastructure. And this is not just a Village of Addison issue. We're not immune to it. Other municipalities within DuPage County are going through the exact same thing we are. Unfortunately, our neighbors to our east, Elmhurst, You'll see just recently, last week in the Daily Herald, it said, I believe the rate is 28% is what their water rate is going up, because they're dealing with this same issue. We're planning for 2030. How are we going to pay for it? How are they going to pay for it? Major corporation, Illinois American Water, they estimate monthly bills will go up $24 a month. Now they service municipalities in Cook and DuPage. So it's not just us, Roselle, Illinois as well, having to put a phosphorus fee, a surcharge fee onto every thousands of gallons of water that's being used. So it's all around. It's not just Addison, but I want to stress how our board and our mayor realize this. It's not all on the tax burden of a resident. It's not residents too.
Thanks, Joe. Well, let's turn our attention now to the Addison Police Department, which, as Dave mentioned a few moments ago, is also being beset by an unfunded mandate in the area of public safety. And Roy Selvik, Addison's Chief of Police, is here to talk about this. And Roy, I know this is something that you knew was going to be coming, so this isn't any big shock, and yet here it is now. And as our attorney, Dave Freeman, mentioned a little while ago, has to do with body-worn cameras that officers have, right? Can you describe what these cameras are and what they do, and how do officers have to interact with something like that?
Sure, I can. Thanks, Don, and thank you for having me here. So the Body-Worn Camera Act, it was heavily amended a couple years ago through what Illinois residents know as the Safety Act. Safety Act made a lot of changes to Illinois law based on a lot of tragedies that were happening throughout the country. Now, as Joe and Dave pointed out, that's not a bad thing. I will tell you, our officers have wanted to wear them. They've wanted to wear them for a while. We, by the law, don't have to have them in place until the start of January 2025. We actually got the equipment a lot sooner, and we opted to say, okay, let's push them out sooner because they want the protection just as the public wants the protection. It's a great thing. What the camera does is it's a device, depending on what vendor you go with, that will cost anywhere from $800-900 just for the unit itself, that is worn somewhere on the chest area, stomach area, for plainclothes personnel, sometimes on a belt, but it's going in a place that is designed to capture as much of the encounter as
audio
possible.
also?
Audio also. So the law is very specific on what needs to be done and how that video needs to be retained. The device itself is really not the most costly portion of this. What municipalities, what towns have realized that it has to do with the retention, it has to do with the data storage, it has to do with the FOIA redaction, all of the hours that employees are putting into.
FOIA is Freedom of Information Act, when the public has access to public documents.
Correct. Correct. So what happens is we've pushed these cameras out, and we now have, I'll give you an estimate. We February 1st is when we said, okay, this is the date that everyone needs to wear a body-worn camera. We pushed it out February 1st, and between February 1st to February 21st, we had 780 hours of video logged in just under 3 weeks.
Yeah, right.
Now that's a lot of video that has to be retained for a minimum of 90 days, and a lot of those go far beyond the 90-day period because they're being retained for use of force cases. They're being retained for arrests, felony cases. Many of those, we have to retain these for several
Evidence
years.
and so on, right?
That is a lot of storage.
And what is redaction?
So redaction is, we get a FOIA request, Freedom of Information. I'll give you an example. We had a traffic crash a couple weeks ago. We got FOIA requests for 17 videos that were, so everyone that was involved in that, we have videos in the vehicles, we have body-worn cameras.
All the officers.
And someone submits, hey, I want all these videos because it's public information. We now have to have someone sift through all those videos, hours upon hours upon hours of video, and go through and redacting all the private information. So if an officer was writing down personal information on a notebook and it's captured.
That's not part of the FOIA, then they can't have that.
If random license plates are driving by, we got to redact all that. If faces of civilians are captured on the video walking in the area that are not part of the investigation, that's all redacted. So there's a lot of additional work that goes into this.
Yeah, right. So Colleen, let's go back to you now. It sounds like we have something that needs to be retained, and I think the stats that I saw from Roy's office, it's going to cost millions of dollars to just do the storage that he talked about. So how is that going to be addressed with the village budget and our operations as far as our police department goes?
So from the beginning, it's going to cost about $3.5 million for the contract that we signed for the equipment. And we have that broken down into over a 10-year period, so it's $350,000 that's coming out of our budget for that. At this point, it is coming out of our operations budget, but as Dave had mentioned earlier, that means there's other services that we can't provide because of that. Again, it's not saying that it's right or wrong to have this. Actually, it sounds like most people do want this, right? It's just, it's costing money, and we got to find that money. So at this point, as Roy also mentioned, this $350,000 isn't going to cover the cost of the reduction and stuff like that. So that's going to be piling up as well, and we're going to have to find more funding for that.
And when it happens within the operations budget, you've only got so much money to work with. You can't go reaching out to, as with Ryan's projects, there could be grant money available. In this case, you got to work with the dollars that are coming in locally.
That's correct.
Yeah, all right. Well, Joe, it sounds like, as you mentioned, and this is the time of year where we're talking about budgeting anyway, so the village board, this is kind of heavy stuff on their plate right now. It's not just happening here with the staff. I mean, you can only bring so much to the board and say, these are issues, folks, what are we going to do? Because they're the ultimate policymakers when it comes to how these projects are being funded.
100%, you're right on that. And as we like to say when we run the budget here and present it to the board, we look at the overall money coming in like many of our viewers do at home, right? How much money are you coming in? And it's pretty bad business to overspend.
Yes.
You cannot outspend the money you're coming in. If you do, it's going to catch up with you. So Colleen is extremely intelligent at her craft, at her job, and as a person. So we maneuver through this, and we look at, as Chief Selvik has a $3.5 million project for 10 years. How are we going to maneuver through that operationally and not put that burden on the residents? And we're really successful in doing that. Now, when we get to the wastewater and Ryan's department over there, it's a different story. We need some help. So, how do we look at that? We try to look for grant funding too. We try to look for other opportunities, and we're in the process of doing that. And we have a great relationship with legislators, regardless of political affiliation. And our mayor does a tremendous job at that. So, we hope to get some funding on that. And it's a hope.
And don't groups like the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference and Illinois Municipal League, I mean, you folks, you get to Springfield, and we have representatives down there, spokespeople, who make sure legislators are aware of the impacts locally within all communities in DuPage and throughout Illinois.
We're actively doing it right now, and we'll be going down there for Legislative Day in April to meet with our legislators. We meet with them throughout the week, our local ones, when they're back in town, even at the federal level too as well. Just filled out just this morning on a portal with a Congresswoman in our district asking for help related to this specific project.
Well, we hope our conversation today has helped you, the residents of Addison, and our viewers learn a little bit more about this topic of unfunded mandates and how this is going to impact us locally. These two projects specifically that were talked about are very important and really do serve the public interest. However, the problem becomes, how do you pay for this? And it has to be dealt with locally. So when you hear these topics discussed either through watching our village board meeting coverage or reading about them or talking to your elected officials, understand the work that's involved in this and the heavy burden that is taking place right now, not only with the village department staff, but also with your elected officials when it comes to addressing the matter of unfunded mandates. Important projects, very much in the public interest, but how are they paid for? So we'd like to thank our panel for being with us today: Joe Moranowitz, Colleen Witt, Dave Freeman, Ryan Hayden, and Roy Selvik, to talk about these very important areas and projects that are happening here within the Village of Addison. We will see you on our next program. I'm Don Weiss. Thank you for joining us.